So thank you, Mr. Stewart and the Institute for inviting me here to talk about how we think, or how I think environmental protection and environmental health fits into the concept of One Health. EPA's mission is protection of human health and the environment. And within that mission, within that phrase, believe me, animal health is included in there, whether it's animal health from the standpoint of domestic animals, livestock, so on and so forth, or wild animals, wildlife species. I would even go as far as to say that part of that mission includes making sure that the health of pets, cats and dogs and so on and so forth, are not compromised. And even the smallest domesticated animal, honeybees, is not compromised. We actually have programs on both of those animals. So for EPA's mission, our responsibility and the public's expectation is that the public, and especially children, are protected from the exposure of unsafe levels of chemicals and other environmental threats. We must and we do continually strengthen our chemical management regime. This is central to EPA's work and the focus of the current administration. The public expects government to provide assurances that chemicals in commerce, in our bodies, and in the environment are very well assessed using the best science, and that unacceptable risks are prevented or eliminated. And again, this applies to whether we're talking about people and people of all ages, animals of all different kinds and species, and the environment as well. So, sort of in listening to that, to me it sounds a heck of a lot like the One Health initiative. Improve the health of people, animals, and the environment. So let me talk a little bit about EPA's programs, and then I'll focus a little bit more on one in particular. So many of you are familiar with, in one way or another, good or bad, with some aspects of our water program and dealing with concentrated animal feeding operations and the need for National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System permits. We also have in our air program the EPA's methane partnership programs, and within that there is the AgStar program, which is a partnership between EPA, USDA, and Department of Energy to encourage the use of methane recovery technologies at confined animal feeding operations that manage manure. And the goal there is reduction of methane emissions while achieving environmental benefits. So, for example, in 2007, the 127 aerobic digesters scattered throughout the United States reduced methane by 80,000 metric tons and also produced 275 million kilowatt hours, that program. In our pesticide program, in which I work, and I've worked for many years, as you've heard Dr. Woodford describe, we sort of balance all of the human health, the environmental health, and animal health, all as part of our regulatory program. Our mission is to ensure that pesticide use is protective of human health and the environment, and again, this includes animals. And we do this through a very comprehensive regulatory program, which is really the licensing of the sale and use of pesticides in the United States. We do this through evaluation of the potential uses of pesticides submitted to us by the manufacturers, pesticide manufacturers, and look at those potential uses against the robust set of scientific studies that we've had the manufacturers produce on that particular pesticide active ingredient and their formulated products. So we have a program that evaluates the uses and potential risks of the pesticides. We need to ensure through our decision making that there's a certainty of no harm to human health and that there's no unreasonable adverse effects to animals in the environment from the proper use of those pesticides. So we focus very closely on the scientific database and the potential uses or the known uses of a pesticide to make our scientific as well as regulatory decisions on whether or not to allow a particular pesticide to go on the market, whether it's for agricultural or non-agricultural use. We're required, and we do constantly use the best available science, scientific methods for risk assessment. We're very transparent of how we go about making our decisions. Everything is put on our website. Most of, if not all of our decisions, whether a specific active ingredient or pesticide or new science policies or whatever, also get posted on our website for public comment. We also engage external scientific experts, scientific panels, if you will, to collaborate with us as we are constantly evolving our science policy or science data requirements, so on and so forth. So I feel very good about how we do our day-to-day basis, our day-to-day business, if you will, in assessing pesticides to make sure that they are not jeopardizing human health or animal health or the environment. Now, a little bit more about animal ag pesticides, if you will. A lot of the pesticides that we register are used on are crop protection pesticides. So they're used on grain crops, forage crops, so on and so forth, which are used, of course, for livestock feed. So we've got to be very, very concerned about the potential dietary exposure, if you will, to livestock, different species, as well as the direct toxicity of the pesticide to those various animal species from direct application or indirect exposure to livestock. As far as, and as I mentioned on livestock protection pesticides, we're very interested and concerned about the potential exposure, whether it's directly to the animal, such as through dips or sprays or dust bag applications, or indirectly, as I mentioned, through their diet or for premise applications, premise sprays, and then the reintroduction of livestock into whether it's a poultry house, barn, so on and so forth. And our safety, our risk assessments for safety to humans, livestock, and the environment, we got to consider the different kinds of exposures that I've mentioned, as well as the toxicities, whether it's acute toxicity, subchronic toxicity, or chronic toxicity of pesticide compound, to make sure that we're comfortable if and when we register or license that particular pesticide, that we know what the potential toxicology characteristics are of that compound. Its carcinogenicity potential for reproduction or developmental toxicity effects, genotoxicity, endocrine disruption potential, so on and so forth. We're very, very sensitive about particular kinds of animal breeds, livestock breeds. So we work with the pesticide manufacturers as they've conducted their R&D for the particular compound, whether or not certain breeds of cattle, for example, might have some level of chemical sensitivity to that family of chemicals or that very specific compound. We'll also look into the metabolism of the pesticide compound in the animal's body. What happens to that compound? How quickly is it excreted? What is it metabolized into? Are those metabolites perhaps of equal or greater toxicological concern than the parent compound? So we qualify that as well as quantify those kinds of residues. As far as humans are concerned, EPA's got to be concerned with everybody in the United States, because we're all eaters. And we all are exposed to residues of pesticides through our diet, whether it's directly from food crops or from animal products. So again, we need to look at what are the potential dietary risks to the general public from different dietary sources. And we also consider different age groups, because your kids, like my teenage son, has a very different diet than adults do, very different diet than an infant, for example. There are regional differences, there are seasonal differences, so on and so forth. So we have to take a look at all those different kinds of dietary patterns, if you will, because they change across the country, through time, through a population, through seasons. As far as safety to pesticide applicators, they're the ones that come to first direct contact with the pesticide, whether they're mixing and loading the pesticide for use in a dust bag or a cattle dip or for use on field crops. Those are the individuals that get the first most direct application. And so what are their potential exposures? Is it inhalation? Is it dermal? Potential ocular? So on and so forth. So to protect them, we need to think about, in working with the pesticide manufacturer, what are the potential risk management measures? What kind of protective clothing and equipment might they be or need to have to protect them so that they don't have a risk that exceeds our level of concern? And then lastly, the environment. We have to answer questions such as, what's the potential contamination of land, of water from various sources of the pesticide use, such as runoff, leaching down into the soil, potentially contaminating groundwater. After all, 50% of the U.S. population gets its drinking water from underground sources, as opposed to public water supplies. What about the disposal of cattle dips? What's the photodegradation? What's the aerobic and anaerobic degradation potential of the compound? What are those degradates? And what are the toxicological properties? And are they leachable? So on and so forth. What are the risks to the wildlife? Whether it's runoff or off-target spray drift to other crops, and the potential phytotoxicity, potential short-term or long-term effects, including reproduction effects to aquatic animals or other terrestrial animals, including bird species. So there's a lot of questions as we do our risk assessments and make our licensing decisions that we need to think about from the standpoint of animal health, human health, as well as environmental health. One of the key components to ensuring the health of humans, animals, and the environment, of course, is risk management. I've already touched on that briefly. Risk management is the use of appropriate measures to prevent unacceptable risks. And this is based on, again, on our understanding of the pesticide's toxicity and potential exposures. We can change how a pesticide is used to reduce the exposure. And when we do our risk assessments, when we do see risks of concern to us, we will then work with the manufacturer to find ways that the manufacturer can alter, if you will, how the pesticide is either formulated or to be used to reduce the risks. And again, it could be reducing application rates or dosages. It could be applying certain kind of protective clothing and equipment for applicators. It could be changing the timing of when the product is applied, so on and so forth. There are literally dozens and dozens, if not probably 100 different kinds of strategies that we in industry can use to make sure that when the pesticide is used properly according to the product label, that it's not going to result into these unreasonable or unacceptable risks. So, talked quite a bit about these three areas and protecting animals, humans, and the environment. So sort of putting it all together, but they are obviously closely linked. For animal health, we need to think about, you need to think about their potential exposure to pesticides as well as other chemicals. What are the risks from direct application or risks of indirect exposure from pesticides or other chemicals? What are the potential residues in meat, milk, eggs, products, so on and so forth? And for humans, sort of the same kinds of thinking. Potential exposures to the general population, to applicators, to bystanders from the application of the pesticide. So the risks, sort of a broad range of risks, and including dietary risks, and how can those risks be reduced to acceptable levels. And then for the environment, runoff risks, leaching risks, wildlife toxicity risks, so on and so forth. So all of this is quite a very intricate web. I think you've heard from speakers this morning and information that I've shared with you. Now I'd like to change subjects just slightly here and talk a little bit about foreign animal diseases and some of the work that EPA is engaged with in this area. As part of our registration program, that includes antimicrobials or disinfectants registration for foreign animal diseases as well as public health diseases. And so our focus here is, as well as the potential risks, we also look at the efficacy of the pesticide or the disinfectant. So EPA is playing a key role in the development of science and generation of data to determine the efficacy of disinfectants for foreign animal diseases. We're working with Dr. Clifford's group at USDA and folks at Plum Island for the scientists at Plum Island to do efficacy work on some of the more common disinfectants, make sure that they are effective against most of the viruses that are in the National Veterinary Stockpile Working Group report, such as such as avian influenza, Rift Valley fever virus, or Newcastle disease virus. We want to make sure that if one of these diseases, there's a major breakout, that the products on the market, as well as other potential new disinfectant products, are efficacious against these viruses and other viruses on porous surfaces, such as concrete and wood, that would be commonly found in livestock facilities. Make sure that they're efficacious when there's a fair amount of organic matter on these surfaces. And the reason that EPA is helping fund this research out of our Homeland Security funds is that a lot of the basic, more standard kind of efficacy work for disinfectants is laboratory generated. It's used on hard surfaces. And so this is sort of a little bit of a new area to make sure that these and other disinfectants have the right amount of efficacy for what you'd really expect in the real world, such as concrete and wood with organic matter. But in doing this and looking at making sure that there's the right amount of efficacy out there for disinfectants, we also got to be concerned about their potential high volume use at whether it's a cattle facility or poultry area. What might be the runoff into aquatic areas? What might be the applicator exposure or the exposure to livestock that's then re-entered into an area that's been treated? So an example here I'd like to share with you briefly is a few years ago when high-path avian influenza sort of reared its head, we got much more involved in this area, and so we needed to look at what disinfectants are currently registered or have we licensed for controlling avian influenza. And if they were used in literally thousands of gallons of diluted spray within a poultry area, such as in the southeast, that is way beyond what we would typically consider sort of routine use. And so we needed to know what might be the risks to applicators who are applying many of these disinfectants day after day after day. What might be the environmental exposure from literally hundreds of thousands of gallons in a relatively confined area that could potentially then be running out of poultry houses? What's their leachability potential, what's the runoff potential, so on and so forth. And then also, what is the potential toxicological risks to poultry being reintroduced into these houses that have been treated. So that's a very good example of how EPA had to look at and consider the potential risks to protecting the environment, the health of people, in this case the applicators, and then the health of animals. So in conclusion, I think very clearly, and I think it should be very clear to you, that environmental health fits in very nicely with the One Health initiative. The One Health mission and EPA's mission is very compatible. They overlap very nicely. Our decisions are made on using the best science available, transparency and collaboration, whether it's with other federal agencies, state departments of agriculture, World Health Organization, FAO, and other international organizations. And our decisions must be made on a daily basis and with the advancement of science.